Most people remember the Fruit of the Loom logo having a cornucopia. Not vaguely, not maybe. They remember it clearly. A basket shape behind the fruit, brown, curved, something that helped explain why the fruit was piled that way in the first place. Except the cornucopia was never there. According to every official source, it never existed. No trademark filing, no archived packaging, no advertising image, nothing. And that's usually where the explanation stops. People misremember. End of story. But that explanation leaves out something really important. Millions of people remember the same wrong detail in the same wrong way. Same object, same placement, same certainty. That is not how memory errors normally work. So instead of starting with psychology, let's start with a more basic question. How does the brain actually build reality in the first place? Because memory does not work the way most people think that it does. Memory is not a recording. Neuroscience has shown this again and again. When you remember something, you're not playing it back, you are rebuilding it. This process is called memory reconsolidation. And each time a memory is recalled, it briefly destabilizes. Then it gets written back into the brain. Sometimes it's unchanged, sometimes it's altered. That explains why eyewitness testimony is often unreliable. It also explains why stories drift over time. It explains why details fade, shift, or merge. But here's the problem. If the Mandela Effect were just memory failure, the errors would be messy. If 10 people misremember something independently, you should get 10 different versions, different spellings, different images, different details. But that's not what we see. With the Mandela Effect, the errors all line up. Same spellings, same missing details, same alternate versions. That consistency is the part that it doesn't fit. So instead of focusing on recall, we need to look earlier into the process. We need to look at perception. Modern neuroscience increasingly describes the brain as a prediction engine. This is known as predictive processing, sometimes called the Bayesian brain model. The idea is simple, even if the implications aren't. The brain does not passively receive sensory input. It predicts what it expects to receive. Incoming information is then used to correct those predictions. You don't see the world directly, you experience a model of it. Vision is not a photograph, it is a controlled hallucination that usually works. Your brain fills in the gaps constantly. It smooths the edges, it resolves ambiguity, it prioritizes coherence over accuracy. And most of the time, this works perfectly. But those models are not built in isolation. They are shaped by language, by culture, and shared symbols. Millions of people learn the same words, they see the same logos, they hear the same stories, and they watch the same movies. They even read the same books. That synchronizes expectations across large populations. So when something changes at the level of shared information, the issue is not just memory. The issue is whether perception updates cleanly for everyone. And sometimes it may not. Now, let's step away from neuroscience and talk about information itself. Information systems do not preserve everything. They compress, they prioritize, they overwrite. Claude Shannon showed that when systems transmit information, detail is sacrificed to preserve signal integrity. The noise is filtered out to keep the message stable. And the brain works this way. Computers work this way. And modern physics increasingly suggests that reality itself may work this way. Quantum error correction is not science fiction, it's a real area of physics. Some models propose that space-time relies on error-correcting codes to remain stable at a fundamental level. If that's true, then reality behaves much less like a static object and more like a managed system. So here's the question that most people never even ask. When an information system updates, what happens to the previous state? In computing, overwritten data does not vanish instantly. Fragments remain, artifacts persist, ghost data lingers until it's fully resolved. Now, apply that idea to consciousness. What if Mandela memories are not false memories at all? What if they are references to outdated information states? That really would explain why these memories feel solid. They don't feel vague. They don't feel dreamlike. They're certain. False memories usually feel fuzzy. Mandela memories often feel solid and anchored. That difference matters. Now, we're going to move into more speculative territory, but it's grounded in science. At the quantum level, systems exist in multiple possible states until decoherence forces resolution. Decoherence does not erase possibilities, it suppresses them. Physics does not agree on what happens to suppressed states. Some interpretations allow branching, some allow collapse, some allow information to persist in non-local ways. But what they agree on is this: reality resolves probabilistic futures into a single stable outcome. Now, connect that to consciousness. If consciousness is tied to information processing, not just neural activity, it may retain traces of unresolved states. Not clearly and certainly not reliably, but enough to register as memory, not imagination. So this is where the timing kind of becomes important. Mandela effects tend to cluster around disruption, deaths, cultural shifts, major historical events. On a personal level, people report similar effects near accidents, medical crises, or moments where life could have gone very differently. Decision points, moments where outcomes diverge sharply. If reality resolves those divergences by selecting a coherent path forward, continuity may not be the priority. Reality moves on cleanly. Consciousness may not fully update. Some people adapt completely, some partially, some maybe not at all. That would explain why Mandela effects are not universal. It would also explain why arguments about them are never fully resolved. People are not disagreeing about facts, they're referencing different resolved states. Now, there's another pattern that is hard to ignore. Mandela effects almost always involve symbols, names, logos, spellings, cultural references. They rarely involve geography, physical laws, or large-scale material changes. Symbols are information dense. They exist primarily as representations, not matter. If reality is information based at its core, symbols are easier to overwrite, not because they're trivial, but because they're flexible. So, what does all this mean? Well, the Mandela effect does not prove alternate timelines. It does not prove simulation theory, and it doesn't prove multiverse. But it does point to something really important. Memory is reconstructive. Perception is predictive. Information systems overwrite. Physics already allows for unresolved states that do not fully disappear. If all that is true, then the Mandela effect is not just people being careless with facts. It suggests that reality, consciousness, and information don't line up as cleanly as we assume. And that may be the part worth paying attention to. Because once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. Not as proof, as pressure. Like reality smoothing itself out and sort of leaving fingerprints behind. And the question is not whether those fingerprints mean something. The question is really how many times reality can rewrite itself before we notice the edits. I'm Larry Flaxman, and this is the Curiosity Files. If you like this type of content, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. Thank you.